All right. This is the April 9th, 2025 open public meeting of the Needham Library Board of Trustees being held via hybrid format, allowing remote attendance. First, I will take roll call to confirm that the trustees, library staff, and persons anticipated to be on the agenda are present and can hear me. So roll call for trustees. Kate Cahill.
Here.
Rob Pettit.
Here.
Jay Fialka.
Here.
Michael O'Neill.
Here.
Megan Small.
Here.
Josh Small.
Here.
And I am here. Library staff, library director, Robert McLean.
Here.
Administrative specialist, Jenna White.
Here.
Program specialist, Galen Dennett.
Here.
Recording secretary, Faith Chrisley.
Here.
And we have deputy director, Diane Finley.
Here.
Do we have a representative from the Library Foundation of Needham?
We did.
Well, we did. We had a lovely mixer with the foundation and the friends right before this meeting. Reminder, this meeting is being recorded. If there is a problem that prevents the completion of this meeting, we will reconvene at 7 p.m. on May 13th, 2025. I hereby call this meeting of the Needham Board of Library Trustees to order at 7:12 p.m. Now, normally we would go into our public comments period, but today we are suspending our normal agenda because we just had an election. And traditionally, the day following the election, we have our first Board of Trustees meeting in which we elect new officers for our Board of Trustees. So we will move to start that process right now. And when I am done coordinating the nomination and election of officers, I will hand over the meeting agenda to the new chair. To begin this process, I now open the floor to nominations for the offices of chair, vice chair, secretary, or arts subcommittee chair. Anyone can nominate another trustee for an office, and self-nominations are also permitted. You can offer a nomination by saying, I nominate the person's name for the office of this. And then once we have all of the nominations, then we will close our nominations and move on to voting.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I thought it was customary for there to be a rotation of sorts.
In what sense?
Hmm?
You mean in?
Well, it's customary, but not necessary. I understand, but I think in terms of describing the process.
Well, yeah. So according to our
misinformed.
No, according to our bylaws, we generally try to follow a rotation of officers. Usually, the chair is someone who has served 3 years and been reelected to the trustees. The vice chair often becomes the next chair, the presumptive chair, following that rotation. And then that kind of set of nominees for the vice chair and chair amongst folks that have that senior status go until someone else kind of is able to then become vice chair. But that's the only rotation that we have according to our bylaws. But it is not required that the vice chair assume the chair position in a subsequent year. So once again, I open up nominations formally, and so.
Nominate Rob for chair.
So do you, Rob, accept the nomination for chair?
I do.
All right, excellent. Great. Any other nominations for chair or any other offices?
Well, I nominate Michael O'Neill for vice chair.
Okay, we have a do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All right. Other nominations?
Nominate Josh for secretary.
Do you accept the nomination?
I will accept that nomination.
Amen. Amen.
I nominate Kay to be the art subcommittee chair.
I accept.
Great. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, I move to close nominations for all officers. Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. So vote on the motion to close nominations. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay. Nope. I was just so taken with your persuasiveness to your voice.
So are you an aye or a nay?
I'm just gonna stick with I.
All right, for the record, aye. We are unanimous. All right.
Horrible.
Because we do not have competitive races, we can move to elect that full slate of candidates. So I move to elect Rob to chair, Michael to vice chair, Josh to secretary, and Kay to arts subcommittee chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Thank you to Rob for taking over.
Thanks. Glad to be serving or potentially serving in that position shortly.
All right. Hearing no more discussion. All those in favor of the motion to elect, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
I was tempted, but.
Yeah. All right. It is unanimous. We have finished the election. And having concluded the election and that item, I now step down as chair and hand over the meeting to Rob.
Thanks, Eric. Successful term as chair. Lots of exciting stuff and just good to be back in the room with everybody. But we've got a huge agenda ahead of us, so I guess we could plow right on into it. First, I don't see any members of the public, but if there are, right now would be the time for public comment. Hearing none, we can move to the minutes of the March 11th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes, and then we can have discussion following the motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, discussion.
It's been a while. Let's open it up for discussion. Does anybody have any proposed changes to the March minutes? All right. Any further discussion? All right, well, hearing none, we should probably move to the vote for real this time. All in favor of approving the March 11th minutes as provided at this meeting?
Aye.
And any opposed? Right, so we can move on then to the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick because there's full agenda tonight. So director's report, the highlights, there's a lot of good news here shared from the Children's Department about outreach that occurred in the community by several people. We're really happy about that. The Children's Department, led by Paula, collected the third most pajamas in the state through the MBLC's pajama drive. So that was a great achievement. She had some great connections from Wingate and the Rotary Club who really helped us achieve that status. Moving on to Technical Services Department. We had a staff development day on Friday, March 21st, where we were closed all day. Part of that day in the afternoon, after we had a gentle movement exercise to get us all limber for a big weeding project. So all staff participated in that weeding and interfiling project, which was an amazing amount of work done in just about an hour. We weeded 1,244 items, and then we interfiled 1,000 science fiction titles into the adult fiction
Can I ask a
collection.
technical question on that? So that means the science fiction section is all now, science fiction is now all mixed in with regular fiction? It's not its own separate section?
Yes, yep, but the spine labels remain.
Fantasy as well, or just sci-fi?
Both, yeah. So we'll be doing the same with mysteries further, so they'll all be interfiled. Part of the goodness of this is that we no longer have to limit the size of those collections because of the size of the shelving for the science fiction collection or the mystery collection. So now that they are within the adult fiction collection. We don't have to make decisions not to purchase something because of limitations for space for those genres within adult fiction. So the staff development day in general is very successful. We sent out a survey afterwards and we're happy. It was very, of course, staff centric, but low key in the sense that we didn't have a lot of outside speakers. We talked a lot about phase one, and the architect, Nicole, came and gave a presentation to all our staff, and we answered lots of questions. And we also did some speed friending activity among all staff, which is much more fun than I thought it would be. We also learn from each other about the summer reading programs that we have for children and teens coming up, and had plenty of time for department meetings outside of it. So it was a nice day with some good food, thanks to Jenna and Baker's Best. So that was a big successful day. The next one will be at the end of September. We've started to think about that because at that time, the demolition above us may not be over. So we may be looking to hold that staff development day off-site. Also under technical services, we have a work study student who started a couple of weeks ago. He studies at UMass Boston, and through this work study project, we only pay 25% of his salary. So UMass Boston pays for 75% and gets grant funding to support that. So we'll have him through the end of this semester doing some important work up in technical services. So that's great because, well, I'll jump again, but because one of our volunteers in technical services, Emily, has just been hired to fill the part-time position in the circulation department. So we're excited. Next month she'll be joining the circulation department as a staff member, paid staff member. We're really excited about that. This follows in the step of last fall we hired another volunteer to be a member of the circulation department, a page. So has a nice track record of fantastic volunteers who have thrown their hats in the ring to join our team in a paid format. So excited about that. Moving on to the reference department, I just want to bring your attention that last month in March, we had the most checkouts in Libby ever in Needham, more than 11,000. We crossed that threshold the first time. So remember that, please, as we get to the revised library state aid spending plan later on in the agenda, and also next month, the spending plan for library state aid for FY26. The need is growing, and funding through the federal government may be ending. So we may be looking for additional local funds to help support that collection. Under personnel, I just spoke about the hiring of Emily as our part-time circulation assistant. So she'll start next month there. And we had the great staff development day. Under phase one, I just want to touch on, we had a couple weeks ago, 2 walkthroughs of the space upstairs for people who were interested in putting in bids, subcontractors and general contractors. We had about 25 people show up over the course of the 2 walkthroughs. And I'll go chronologically. So the next thing chronologically is
was Hank, like, was he happy with that? Did that seem like there was a good number?
it was, yes, it was, yeah, a good turnout.
They expected that was like a good amount of people to show up.
Yes. Yeah. And especially in conjunction with the number of companies that downloaded our bid documents from Project Log. Was 3, at least, it was 3 pages within 48 hours of it going up on Project Log. So there's a lot of interest, and I'll touch on that because we got the bids in for the subcontractors. But 2 weeks ago, on Wednesday evening, March 26th, Hank and I went to the FinCom hearing on Article 29 for the funding of the construction of Phase 1. And we gave a short presentation because we could only show 4 slides. And in the end, the Finance Committee unanimously voted to recommend that town meeting approve the Article 29 to borrow the money for the $2.386 million for Phase 1. So that was great news. On April 3rd, last Thursday, the bids were due from the subcontractors for the 4 subcontractor categories: electrical, HVAC, acoustical tile, and glass and glazing. So those were opened, and the good news is that the 4 lowest bids are about $60,000 under what we budgeted for those 4 subcontractors. So that's good news. The bids from the general contractors are due a week from tomorrow, so we'll see if hopefully that will follow suit. So that was some good news that was shared with the Permanent Public Building Committee on Monday night when they met. And moving on to financial reports, the first one in your packet is the operating budget report, which shows we're still on track to return a significant amount of salary money to the town at the end of this fiscal year because of the openings we had in the first 7 months or so of this fiscal year. But we're on track. We will be spending, now that we're fully staffed, all of the money for books and materials, as well as spending the rest of the expense line items. So we are good for the last quarter. Budget-wise there. Moving on to the next financial document, it's the state aid expenditure. So we have, in the past month since we last met, had 3 bills that we're paying for with our library state aid based on the funding plan approved by the trustees last summer. So there's an overdrive bill, canopy bill, and then Carol Overly is the facilitator who led us at staff development day through the hour of gentle movement, which sounds gentle and wonderful, and was kind of like stressful and sore. Like it was intense. It was like gentle was a misnomer, but it was really good. She does classes for the CAF, and it was just really good. I just thought it'd be sort of like something I could like zone out, you know, but like it was good, like in an unexpected way.
It was more than I had anticipated.
Yeah.
Everyone participated,
Yeah.
which was the best.
Warrior
part.
pose
Everyone was
1,
in it.
warrior pose
Yeah.
2,
I,
goddess
however,
pose.
Did not, because I was donating blood at that point.
Yes.
It's a perfectly reasonable reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 state aid accounts expenditures the past month. The trust fund report, there were 2 shared with the packet I sent out last Friday. The first one was a revised one for March because the 3 disbursements in the middle of the chart were represented as not as negatives but as positives. So this is just an update to that. And then the April 1st trust fund report is here in the packet. We just had 1 bill for $23.16 for Baker and Taylor books, which is reflected on the April report there. Moving on to the statistical reports, so those are there, and one thing that's not here under the reference department and the children's department, because it's doesn't jive with our chart, is the purchase number, the number of titles or books that we purchased by those departments. You may remember typically in addition to programs and staff actions, there's been a category of materials purchased and then a number. Those numbers are manually created and aren't really reflective. The chart is more reliable,
Okay.
so that's why they're no longer here. So the chart of occurrences does show the real number of total items added that have DIB occurrences, which is more reliable. So that information won't be shared moving forward. And then the summary report of new items added to the collection in March with the number withdrawn, which is large, a lot due to the staff development day, the reading project that we participated in adult fiction. And a lot of this has to do with preparing for phase 1, but also, well, the domino effect for preparing for phase 1, which is moving the adult graphic novel collection to the first floor and from the second floor. To do that, we need to move basically every collection on the ground floor. So we are weeding and interfiling, and we'll be moving things in order to make room for that. And in addition, bring the large print collection forward so it's easily accessible to that population, and take give it the good real estate of the physical audio visual collection, which will live along the walls now. The audio books, the CDs, and the DVDs. So where they live now will be where the large print collection is, so people don't need to walk to the back wall with the large print mysteries. We'll have that up front and do some other work. Yes.
You have a question? Hey, I had a question also.
Ask if you're getting, it sounds like a lot of physical labor. Are you getting the help that you need, or is there a need? Is there a need for, I don't know.
Yep.
It sounds like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So we have, we're making use of some circulation staff who are putting in extra hours to work in technical services on these projects, as well as volunteers and technical service employees who are helping to work on this. The staff development day was a big success, and we'll look to replicate that sort of group effort too. All of the work on the ground floor doesn't need to be done before phase 1 starts in early September. So that work will continue throughout this calendar year. So our timetable is good for that.
Right, you just, if you get to a point where you feel like you need help, so don't afraid to speak up.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
She has volunteered to do some
Yeah,
lifting for you.
I have a question. So remind me, what is being moved, what sort of audio stuff is being moved to the different area?
So the physical audio visual collections, which are the audio books, the physical audio books, the physical CDs, and the physical DVDs, will live along the shelving on the walls.
So is that reorganization part of a plan of reducing the size of those materials in the streaming world, or are you anticipating, in terms of allocating the collection, those sorts seem to be potentially the sorts of materials which over time we're going to be reducing, perhaps, in our collection?
Yes, there might be some minor weeding before that is done, but we won't do a major weeding because we do have space for them to live where they're going. So we're not going to be.
I wasn't sure if it was part of a plan to reduce,
It may be more of the plan in relation to phase 3, when we are reimagining the circulation department and putting in a new meeting room. But for now, there is room for that collection just to be, we just want to, that prime real estate, give it to the large print collection.
I had a question. I think we're missing the statistics report for February in our packet.
We're missing this one.
Well, no, it's always a month
Right.
behind. So I don't know, maybe we can look at February and March's next month.
Yes. Sorry about that.
It's okay. There was a lot
There
in
was
the
like
package.
so many attachments,
Yeah.
I'm like 18 attachments. Everything must be here, right? I guess not. It should have been 19. Sorry about that.
But you, for getting volunteers, is there an opportunity to enlist the services of high school kids who are trying to get their community service hours? Would that be something to look into?
Yes, but not right now. So
Okay.
don't tell anybody.
No, I'm not
But
gonna ask anyone.
part of, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, yeah, the volunteer policy we have and how we're working on like a web form for our website for volunteers to offer their services to us. Right now, it's like send Rob an email, which isn't very efficient.
Right.
So in addition to that, we'll be revising the volunteer policy. So we're gonna do it in conjunction, probably over the next few months.
Okay, that would probably not work for the kids trying to graduate right now. So if it's gonna
Right,
be
like,
back
and
in the
the
future.
children's department already has enough volunteers for the summer. There's been a lot of interest, so, yeah. But it is, projects like that are really good for people who, like high schoolers have a set number of hours that they can commit so that, we can get a finite project done. And on both ends, we're happy to see each other leave, like we're not committing to somebody for a year plus to come in 2 hours a week, and we have to alert certain staff to remember to train them or give them some work or whatnot. But we love volunteers, that's how. I keep looking at Erhard, I'm sorry, Rob.
Oh, sure. So is there anything else in the director's report, or should we move into new business? We went over statistical and the DIB staff efforts.
I'm done talking.
Great, so in that case, let's move to new business. The first item under that is the gift list.
That I did include in the packet, and there's one gift, a very large gift, a check from the Friends for $15,750, which was the payment for the money they approved to pay to support the library this calendar year. There's $9,000 more to come to the permanent donation fund, and that check will be given to us in early June. So this check we have now, so we can move forward and order things that this money will be spent on.
So this is advising for ordering materials, is that
For
the,
different things, we have a plan to order new book cards, materials. Yeah, so the Friends have approved, what was it, $60,000 or so. And the money is in two ways. They write us a check that goes in the PDF, or they pay the bill directly. So that's why the $24,750 is the PDF money, and the other 25,000. So I think it's 49,000, just under 50,000 that they approved, is paid direct, and that's sort of like programs, summer programs, and the water that they do, they pay that directly, where they just get invoices. The money for the collections and other thing, we pay for, so that's why we want to check to put in the permanent donation fund. Yeah, so we're all set, because we'll start using their money to order books for this summer. Because on July 1st, we're still setting up contracts to be able to use our operating budget money for collections. So there's a lapse when that money's not available yet for us to use. So we use the Friends money at that time. So there's no gap in us ordering materials.
okay, that's a good explanation.
Any discussion of gift list?
So there's like another 9,000
In June,
in June.
yeah, that will come to us, and that's just about half of what they've committed to spend for the library this calendar year. The other $25,000, they'll pay those bills themselves. Kathleen DeMayo will write the checks and mail them off herself.
Just like to thank the friends. I know they're not with us right now, but they were here earlier, and we know that there's a lot of really hard work that goes into collecting this money. So it's tremendous that they are donating this to the permanent donation fund. If there's no further discussion, do we have a motion to approve the donation of $15,750 from the friends to the permanent donation fund?
I move to approve.
Second.
Accept.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Right. I think I've got the hang of it now. Moving on to the next item under new business, we've got, sorry, I'm going to correct the agenda here. Revising the library state aid spending plan. So I'll turn it over to Rob.
So I shared this request with the trustees. So at the top of the sheet is the plan that was approved last summer for our spending of library state aid in fiscal year 25. And below it is a revision that we're recommending the trustees approve tonight. The first change is to reduce the FY25 library salaries allocation from $14,803 to $1,803. We haven't touched that yet, and we don't intend to, because we have enough money, as I mentioned, in our operating budget to cover salaries, and even more so, we'll be turning back money to the town. So we don't need that $14,803 or even the $1,803. We probably won't touch. But we want to take that $13,000 that we're reducing it by and increase the overdrive advantage account by $3,000 that was approved, raising that to $29,000. We want to increase canopy to 9,500, increasing that by 2,000. And those increases are based on the monthly bills that we are seeing and that we expect to have. So this money will get us through the end of June to cover those bills. So there's no.
Are we seeing an increase in override drive advantage? Is it an increase in usage, or is it increasing what we're being charged for those materials?
It's an increase in usage, and the hold list is increasing. So we want to meet the demand that we see that our local patrons have on the hold list, so they don't need to wait as long. So any licenses we purchase for our Advantage account go to Needham patrons first. So we buy those extra licenses to reduce their wait time. And so as it becomes more popular, yes, usage goes up, but the hold list becomes
Also
even
goes up.
longer.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
this is because of or correct me from either our last meeting or the meeting before that, this is money that we wanted to go into the operating budget, but this town wouldn't allow because of the
DSR4.
TSR4. Is that correct?
Right, so for FY27, we'll be completing the DSR4 form to move the overdrive advantage money into the operating budget. This year it would have been 26,000, but you'll see when we have our spending plan for FY26, it'll be even higher than 29,000, which is what we would put in the DSR4 for FY27.
That's been going on for ages.
No, I understand. Yeah.
You know, the trend is that the audiobooks, digital resources, the usage keeps going up. The amount spent keeps going up. And right now, I mean, this is a significant chunk of our state aid,
Yeah.
which is a very, based on the current climate, it's hard to tell where that's going to be in future years. So I'm sure there'll be some more advocacy down the road for that.
Yeah. Canopy, we're seeing some nice usage there, some increase. That is a similar billing situation as to Hoopla. we get billed based on usage there. So we want to not have to put any limitations on that for the end of this fiscal year. Bring up or adding more money to these two will free up some money in our operating budget so we can cover HOOPA, because we're running out of HOOPA money. So by backing off the operating budget for overdrive and canopy, or not having to go there, will mean we can bear HOOPA bills. We want to increase the staff training and travel by $5,000, from 4,500 to 9,500. Based on one of our staff is getting a master's in library science, and the educational reimbursement will be coming up this fall, as well as we have more staff going to conferences. We've been making use of scholarships through the Mass Library System. I think we've saved over $12,000 with those scholarships. I think 7 of our staff have received those scholarships over the course of this fiscal year. 5 of them, 1 of them going to ALA in June, and 5 going to MLA in May. But we have more interest, and we want to support those staff to make sure that everybody can go and get that professional development. So this is a real cost that we're happy to support.
That was when Jackie went to.
Yes, Jackie didn't get a scholarship because that opportunity popped up outside of the deadline to apply. So that cost was borne by the library. But similar to that, but not just conferences, but any sort of other paid professional development opportunity. This is good. The last one is a new request for $3,000 for promotional materials and program support materials. So promotional materials, we need some bookmarks and program support materials for our summer reading program for children's. We have costed out the expense of printing all the materials in-house versus having a printer do it, and it's cheaper for us to have an outside vendor do all the printing to support the children's summer reading program. There's a lot that we are developing and passing out, so that is about $1,230 for that printing. So this $3,000 will allow us to get a good supply of bookmarks, which people are just dying for all the time, and pay for the summer reading materials. So that is the $13,000 to move away from the library salaries for FY25 to these other categories.
You had mentioned as we were getting toward this item on the agenda that state aid is connected to the federal library aid likely, or is somehow we're not going to get some of this money in the future. And I'm curious how that's factoring into our ways of budgeting for this.
Yes and no.
Okay.
There's federal funding through the IMLS that comes to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners to support, which they then use to pay for the platform fees for overdrive for all the networks.
I see.
And they have a program called LEA, which is basically overdrive, and they give a big chunk of money to each library network to purchase ebook licenses. So they haven't made any decisions, but they have stated that they don't want to lay staff off who have their salaries underwritten by the federal money. So what may happen is some of this funding in support of ebooks may be pulled back. If that's the case, Minuteman is going to have to find the $19,000 to pay for the platform fee. And Minuteman's gonna have to decide whether to have members make up um, the difference in losing the funding for ebook licenses, or just not purchase as much. Either way, I think it's gonna fall back on member libraries to either spend more on our Advantage accounts so that that effect isn't felt locally as much. Or in FY 27, because our FY 26 budget is all set in Minuteman, our FY 27 assessment could go up in a way that is perhaps high raising, and so, library state aid may be a way to support a higher assessment, member assessment for FY 27. This is unknown. Minuteman is working on its FY 27 budget this summer. Part of the good news for the timing is that Minuteman's lease on its building is up in August of 26, and they're looking not to renew that license and move into sort of a work share space, which would be much more affordable. So there could be savings there that could offset some of the loss of federal money that comes through the MBLC. But all of this is like unknown right now because there is a lawsuit that the Attorney General and others across the state have filed because of because the executive order about IMLS. So we just have to be prepared that we may have to lean more heavily, even if we successfully move some overdrive money into the operating budget for FY 27. We may have to, in FY 27, a year from now, we want to supplement those funds with some overdrive, with some state aid.
Can I just make sure I got that by kind of saying it back to you? Because my initial question was about the ways that that federal funding might affect how we think about these budgets here. And what I heard you say is that that federal funding through IMLS comes through in a way that basically subsidizes our ebook materials, right? And so what we're seeing here in terms of our costs is after a subsidy that is connected to that federal aid. And so that may go away and increase our costs around that part of our collection. The second thing is, and you didn't say this, but this is now how I'm connecting it back to state aid, is state aid is ultimately something that the state legislature, right, budgets to give to libraries across the state to supplement their budgets. But they're taking that out of a state budget, which is dependent in part on federal block grants. And so as those may be hit, reducing the overall budget that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has, state aid could be a casualty in a new state legislature budget.
Yes.
Okay.
And in recent years, the state legislature and governor have been very generous in increasing library state aid. This year, we've received about $79,000 in library state aid, which is the most ever. So it could drop, it could go back to a lower amount.
Yeah, I just wanted us to be thinking about all of those.
Right, we could
dynamics.
have greater needs and less state aid.
Okay.
A fine balance.
Great. Any further discussion on the revised encumbrance requests? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the revised requests?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right.
Thank you for those explanations, Rob. It's a complicated system that's helping us understand. Thank you.
So next, under new business, we have a letter to town meeting members relating to phase 1 construction. So I'll open it up for discussion on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the letter to get us started. So this is a revision of the letter that we sent to the Select Board and Finance Committee. And it's now addressed to town meeting. There were a few changes to kind of make that clear, as well as some additional information that was added in. The goal of having this letter is to hopefully put this as one of the materials in support of the warrant articles for our budget and as well as for the phase one construction cost. And so we did this last year, having a version of our letter to the select board go up in front of town meeting members in support of our architecture. What do we call this? What are we? Our design phase for phase one, our design work. And so that's what this is. And we would vote to approve this to say that this is our letter from the Board of Trustees to town meeting.
I have two very minor changes that I think are negligible. Number one, paragraph 1, 2, 3. We defer to Deputy Town Manager Katie King and Library Director Robin McLean. She's now Town Manager Katie King. So that changed.
Not
Not
yet.
yet.
Is when she been hired?
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, that transitional happened.
I thought that
think,
transition happened. I
in
apologize.
June.
It's my fault. Never mind. And then the other thing is, I don't know if it's worth in the next paragraph, in particular, we seek your support for important capital funding requests, whatever the number is. Should we put the article in there since we know what article number it is now? It's Article 29, right? Like put in parentheses, Article 29.
I
Hmm,
think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
okay.
I received my copy of the warrant, which just came out.
Okay.
It's Article 29.
Okay. That's a good idea.
And the exact amount is just $2,386,000. This was here.
Yeah.
They should change the number.
Oh, I see.
Definitely 29.
Yep, it's in black and white.
Yeah.
29.
Rob did it. Yeah, it's 2,386,000. So
2 million.
Thought this was a
2,386,000.
really well written
Yeah.
letter that articulated the need for this, and really, I think most importantly for town meeting, the thoughtfulness of the process.
Mhm.
Because my experience in town meeting, a lot of times people are focused on how did we get here, and this really answers that question effectively, and also addresses efforts that have been taken to keep costs reasonable and to phase it out. I think one of the key things in advocating for this is explaining to folks that this is one phase in a multi-phase process, which will take many years to completely work through. So that people aren't surprised when we come back with phase two. This is a full library renovation, this is the teen area renovation, which is step 1 of 4. But I thought it was a fantastic letter.
I believe it has to be submitted to the town clerk to get it into the packet for the town meeting. I think that's the process. So we make sure it goes in the packet. You don't.
I believe so.
Something like that. We'll make sure it gets
Yeah.
there. Well, between the three of us, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Last year, I think we had approved this letter before the change in officers. And so it had the previous year's chair on there. And so we could change this list here under the Sincerely Board of Trustees to the current officers at the end.
If we stated after today, it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, Rob.
I shared the Charles River Regional Chamber letter with the trustees, and just want to, part of that, there's a reference in the second to last paragraph that sometimes there are more than 100 teams.
Not accurate?
Well, just this says sometimes more than 90, and this says sometimes more than 100. So I don't know if we just wanted them to be the same.
Yes.
And just, it is true that sometimes more than 100 are they hit there, if we want to change this 90 to 100.
Yep, do that. Sounds good to me.
Any further discussion on the letter?
They're gonna be able to, get that letter from the from the chamber into the materials that are distributed?
I sent it to Katie King, and she said she'll get back to me as to exactly how it needs to get up there.
Okay,
But she hasn't gotten back to me. I assume she's had a busy week.
Yeah, I talked to her this morning and she said they were waiting for the election to happen before figuring out this.
Got it.
The town clerk and the moderator and town hall will figure out how to get these letters out.
Okay,
The chamber letter is a little bit different than the trustees letter, which this may be on the digital table, the trustees letter. This may be an email from the town clerk out to town meeting members. Or they both could be on the digital table. If that makes sense to me. Katie said as if it was a term that everybody knew and understood.
is one,
We do
I
now.
asked the town meeting members, is one better than the other in terms of likelihood of impacting?
I don't remember that difference, do you? Rob or Karen, do you remember the difference between, what do you call the digital table versus the
Yeah.
what?
I guess there used to be a table at the back of Powers
I do remember
Hall.
the
Of
physical table.
physical table, so that there's no longer a physical table, but it's on the website now, so it's a digital table
Oh, I see.
of the materials that used to live on the physical table. And that maybe because of COVID, the physical table.
Yeah,
Okay.
I only know the digital materials that get distributed that are on the town meeting website.
maybe that's the digital table. But if we approve this letter, I'm happy to make these edits and then I'll send them to both of you and you can make sure it gets to the town.
So I believe there were just a few edits that we discussed, including changing 90 to 100. And in the third paragraph, there's one additional change to reference Article 29.
Yeah.
And then just changing the officers. Do we have a motion to approve the letter with those changes?
I moved to approve the letter.
Seconded.
All in favor?
I,
Any opposed?
I also have a figure was changed in the letter, 2,386,000. That was
Yeah.
not in the original letter.
yeah, it was a different number
So
slightly.
that's the other piece. That
Yeah.
have.
Oh,
I think I have everything here, and so I'll be able to make those edits.
I think since it was a change we discussed at the meeting, I think we should be fine with the
Yeah, because we approved what we discussed.
So next, under new business, we've got the bid and construction document FAQ for phase 1, which was part of the materials. I'll turn it over to Rob on that.
So this FAQ is, will also be shared with town meeting members through the digital table. And put it together and we added some questions and answers also. So this FAQ is one of several FAQs that we'll be developing for different audiences. The point of this one is for town meeting members to be fully informed before they vote on Article 29. We will be developing our own FAQs for staff, library staff, and an FAQ for residents and patrons about the construction project. We're looking to have the FAQ for staff ready beginning of June and the one for the public beginning of July. Those will get into the sort of questions that town meeting members don't need to know about, what about the dust or what about the noise or whatnot. So this FAQ that Hank and us, we developed gives a nice history to how we got to where we are and answers some vital questions about during the project. How we'll be servicing teams and the questions about seating and tables during the construction project. So
Is
that's
this
what,
something that, you said you were gonna do one for residents of the town for July, but is there something that we should be referencing as trustees to put out to support for Needham Facebook group, Needham Heights Alliance, all those various Needham groups to encourage our town meet for non-town meeting members? So like for me to put out something on my personal Facebook page or on Needham Facebook group saying we should support the library for, tell your town meeting members to support this project.
yeah, in anticipation as town meetings vote, this would be FAQ would want to share with town meeting members and residents.
And residents, okay.
Right, this will be the public document.
Okay.
In preparation for,
So this will be somewhere where there can be a link to, please, for anyone who in the town who wants to go look at it, they can look at this document prior to town meeting.
yes.
Okay.
So just bring it here to inform the trustees about this document and what it's included here, and just see if there's anything that you think might be missing that town meeting members may find crucial in deciding whether or not to support Article 29.
I thought the content was good. The formatting had a bunch of problems throughout that kind of reduced some of the readability. Like there's kind of uneven spacing between paragraphs and between the question that was being asked and the answer. Like, is it no space or a space between those things? And some of what hyphen was used in the phase schedules and things like that. Also, you have a header here for the question at the bottom of page 3 that isn't attached to its answer on page 4. So like there's some cleanup there that I would recommend if you have access to the Word document to just make that formatting consistent. And I'm happy to share the highlights for what I think we should pay attention to on that.
I had 3 small nits. The first is in the first question. I believe the last renovation, like most of the work was 2004, 2005, but it actually opened up in March of 06. So we might want to say 2004 to 2006, because I'm sure there'll be folks there that remember that. The second is at the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4. The way that it's worded, I think this might be a holdover from when maybe this was used for something else. We would say this initial design phase will be funded from free cash. Construction will require borrowing according to the capital plan. Should we be referring to, we are now asking you for funding for construction?
Yeah.
And say, the initial design phase was funded with free cash. And then lastly, and this is a real nit, but the bottom of page 3, when we put the dollar amount of 2386000, should just put the dollar sign in front of that.
And the 6, okay. So
The
number is
600 is
correct.
missing there, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. The 600 is missing there and at the top.
Right.
Because it should be.
It's
It
correct.
should be missing.
Oh, was the 600 was the incorrect?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My bad.
I had a nit like that as well.
Yes.
So under was the feasibility study or master plan completed first? In that paragraph after the URL, you have this study started with the library's fiscal year 2023-2027 strategic plan. If any of the folks are actually paying attention to our meeting minutes, we actually worked on these things concurrently. The study happened, started basically a couple of months after we started the strategic planning process. And so the strategic planning process was not complete before the study began.
The word with,
Technically.
the word with is in there, she's kind of concurrent.
Started with, I guess, could be yes. So
Current 2.
I mean, maybe it's fine with the with. This is me being nitpicky because it certainly didn't follow after
Right.
the strategic plan, but they were done concurrently. So it could be saying
along with.
I'm
In conjunction.
it might be fine. It might be fine with the with.
That's fine.
It's just
I think with is fine.
when I read it, I initially think it as
Oh,
one after the other.
Sequential.
Yeah.
Yes. In concurrence.
Concurrent.
So once again, might be fine.
If you want to change it, the rest of us are not going to object.
We don't need to vote on this in any case, but just kind of providing feedback.
I'm also going to nitpick one minor thing.
Go for it.
In project scope phase 1, which is on page 1. What is the scope of the phase 1 teen area renovation? In the 3rd line, teens is capitalized, and they're It's not referring to the team room anymore, it's referring to people. So, and then specific people that need to be capitalized.
Got it.
Unless you have a reason for that, or this is typo.
No reason.
Okay.
I have a highly tangential question. In the unlikely event that somebody hijacks the discussion and wants to ask about the chairs, the $750 chairs, I believe we never actually got those, correct?
I don't believe
Chairs.
so.
These
We did
$750
get rid of
chairs.
some of the previous chairs that we owned here. They were in poor shape. But as far as I know, we did not replace the chairs. These days.
Yeah.
If we did, we
No,
bought.
we bought
less-
some.
We
We
bought
bought
less.
some, but not all.
No, we did not
buy
buy all of them. No.
Okay.
We're still using some of those 19-year plus.
We got chairs. We
Okay,
got rid of the
we're still-
ones
I like
that were
that.
the top
We're
stuff.
still using the 19-year
Okay.
plus
The ones at the
chairs.
bottom.
We only replaced the ones.
We only replaced
absolutely
the ones that,
necessary.
yeah. that we
Yeah.
needed to absolutely necessary.
But we don't have as many as we had here. We only have 108. We used to have 160.
So
Some of
that's
them
not the
retired.
cloth chairs, right?
Now it's these black things you're sitting on.
Okay.
Did people check out those other 50, never bring them back?
A library of things.
Hopefully it doesn't come up, but it's
Yeah.
good to know.
What they asked, no, we bought some, but no.
Any further comments on the FAQs? Okay, in that case, we'll move to the next item under new business, which is the action plan. I'll turn it over to Air Park and Jay for that.
Okay, so exciting times. This is the time of year where we review our strategic plan goals for the year, which we have been enshrining in the action plan. And so we did this last year using a new set of templates that Rob developed, and then we shepherded that process. And I'm happy to be shepherding this process with Jay again this year. So I'll turn your attention to the process document, which is kind of like outlining what are the steps for us to complete this thing. So as you will see in the packet, we have an updated annual review template with the fiscal year 25 action items interleaved. And Diane and Rob have started filling in where we're at with those goals and action items in there. At this meeting, we want to make sure that we all kind of understand the process of the review. This is literally what I'm doing right now. And hopefully assign all of the trustees to those goals 1 through 6. And I think we want to do it again where it's like 2 trustees per set of goals. And then they can work to review each of those, putting in their notes and comments. Ahead of the May trustees meeting, we would ask that those trustee teams schedule meetings with Rob and Diana to go over progress on their goals and then fill in those notes and comments. At the May trustees meeting, we'll discuss draft reviews for goals 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Trustees, the way we'll do this is trustees will have an opportunity to suggest their own notes and comments for each reviewed action item as we go through that. So, we'll look at the ones that have been submitted by the folks that we're reviewing there. We'll have additional discussion that might lead to additional notes and comments on those items before we finalize the reviews for those goals. Then at the June trustees meeting, we'll discuss the remaining 2 goals, 5 and 6. Once again, have a chance to talk about those and contribute thoughts for notes and comments. Also in that June meeting, that's when we'll be introducing, or Rob and Diana will be introducing the draft fiscal year 26 action plan. We'll be finalizing our review at the same time that we'll be looking at that next year's action plan. And then ahead of the July trustees meeting, Jay and I will take all of the reports around goals 1 through 6, compile them into a final report. We'll ask Rob to author a cover letter for that, and we'll include some library statistics like we did in our report last year, so that at the July trustees meeting, we'll have a complete document for us to adopt and approve as our strategic plan annual review. And then once that's approved, then that goes on the website. We send it to the select board and, you know, the town manager, and
We start all over.
then we start all over again. I did not say that that at that July meeting, we might also be approving the July fiscal year action plan. But that's the idea, is that those things will be happening at the same time. So as soon as one is reported on, we'll have the next one in force.
King is dead.
Yes. So any questions about that process?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that they are 4 in 1 month and 2 in the other, as opposed to 3 and 3? I'm sure there is, but I'd like to know what that reason is.
Yeah. This is a gift to Rob from me, to say that we have 2 months to cover all these things. And to not make the agenda insane, goals 1 through 4 in one meeting, goals 5 and 6 plus the June, plus the action plan spreads that as best possible.
And we've got groups of 2 trustees.
No,
So
right,
we
right.
have two and one and
No, I
one in
understand
the
that.
other.
Yeah, but that's how we ended
Because
up
of the
there.
extra things that are in June. Like
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I mean, it seems like a great plan. I suppose should we figure out the teams right now?
Yeah, that would be what we got to do next. I would love to work on goals 5 and 6 again if I was to throw my hat in the ring, because that means I'm continuing to work on the design and construction item, which is goal
I'd
6.
like to do that as well, only because I'm not gonna have time necessarily before the next meeting, like just know what my schedule is upcoming. So I will happily work with Earhart. If that's okay with everybody else.
I was gonna propose 3 and 4, and I was gonna ask if Michael might be willing to join me on 3 and 4. 3 is outreach and 4 is EDI, and I thought we might collaborate on that. Was that?
That would be fantastic, yes.
We did one or two last
We
time.
did, yeah.
Could I join you
We
for
can
1 and
do one
2?
and-
Sure, yeah, happy to
What?
have you, Rob.
Alright.
You can sit without, because it's only 6 items.
Yeah.
I'm happy to join the teams. Good to
Okay.
have everybody involved.
All right,
Be sure to put that.
To
in
go
the report.
first, yes.
all right, I've got those names, and so,
So 1 and 2, Megan, Rob, and Jay?
Can I ask a question? So we had this discussion last month, I think after the state talked to, I forget who, about the open meeting law and stuff like that. Wasn't when you got 3 people involved, it has to be an open meeting?
Oh. That was me who asked that.
Is that
Mhm.
right?
That was the same-
Wasn't that the
remember?
interpretation that?
If there was a third person, it was not,
Was it more than 3 or was
More
it
than 3 is a quorum.
more than 3 is a quorum? But
right.
I mean, I don't know.
But I think they were doing something with Earhart and Rob were doing something I was interested in helping. And because that I had interest.
yeah, it was a gray area.
Yeah, it was gray area,
Funky
exactly.
kind of thing, so.
I mean,
I don't
You're
know where that
absolutely
word
right.
comes from. What is the, where did that come from?
you were the one that said it.
I do.
Yeah, because it was like the
Oh, that, my notes.
Summary,
from
yeah,
that.
your notes of
Oh,
that,
I'll
the
go back to
state-
those notes.
Well, for goals 1 and 2, it sounds like the other goals are fine. For goals 1 and 2, I can review the open meeting law. And we can always figure out a way where I can focus on certain items and perhaps present
Yes.
them to you in a open way.
You can divvy it up too.
Yes.
That's true.
You do 1, you do 2, and
He's out of control. This is being taped.
So
And I'm like the only
for
one.
Rob and Diana, does that timeline work to be doing, the first 4 goals? Maybe meet up with folks in the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Yes,
Got it.
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the responsibility then of those teams, is to schedule those meetings, so
Now
that,
then, next-
because you'll want to be able to submit your draft reports for those items for the packet for the May meeting.
And we've got the Word template of, where it is so far. So that'll be helpful for the teams to just be able to populate this template with the,
Right, so the 5 and 6 team, this will be updated and shared later, so don't be.
Got it.
So according to your notes,
Oh, okay.
anytime more than one trustee is designated to work in collaboration with other trustees on a topic that will be reported back to the board, it's an official subcommittee of us.
Any more than one?
Yeah,
That doesn't
but
sound
board members may individually discuss, email, or text each other on a topic as long as it involves fewer than a quorum.
right. That would be the three.
So you can discuss amongst yourselves.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
Almost a discussion, won't be official. Designated.
It's a lot of overhead to call each of these subcommittees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Perhaps, the idea with having the teams was that way there's multiple trustees input on each item.
Right.
And it kind of, it gets people looking at more different sections. But if there's an issue with that, I'm just thinking out loud here, I suppose you could have it where within each team, one person reviews one goal, prepares the responses, circulates it to the other member, and the other member shares their feedback at the meeting. It's not perfect, but that would avoid a substantive deliberation.
That's very legal.
Sure.
I would rather not, but I think that would, based on that description,
So each person would take part, a goal, one of the goals, right, that's what I'm saying, and then
Yeah.
share it.
It's your part of work.
you can share it ahead of the meeting, which is fine. You can
And-
circulate
and we
materials.
meet
Well,
with
you can
Rob.
share with
We're
your
gonna meet
partner,
with
too.
Rob, right?
Right,
This is
exactly.
gonna entail a meeting with Rob, is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So but could they still meet together with
I think,
Rob and
yeah,
Diana?
I think we could all, yeah.
That's just meeting with Rob. That's just getting information from Rob
Okay,
and Diana.
great.
Uh,
All right, cool. And so you'll just write these things, share the document. There won't be a deliberation.
And nothing's being approved in May or in June.
Yeah,
So that gives some time, when the other person on the team will have had time to review it by the May or June meeting, and they can then weigh in with any edits that they have.
all right. I'll trust we're above board.
So complicated.
It's,
Yes, Rob.
If it helps, we can quickly go over the items that are not completed to do a status report. If you want.
Yeah, why don't we do that? That would be great.
Turn it over to Ben.
Yeah, so we've made some significant work in the last few months. So we're just going to talk about the ones that are still in progress. So goal 1, objective 1, review and enhance the library's onboarding documentation for new employees. That is in progress, where I think I'd say we're at 95%. We created this onboarding document, and I, as a new employee, use it on myself as a test. And then we are getting a new employee at the end in mid-May, so we should be able to also use that for that new employee. On to the next page. Developing a short questionnaire for children's programming, that is also in progress. We have begun to expand an existing questionnaire to gather feedback on children's programming and collections. The next one is circulation department pilots a new staff sheet to capture useful patron feedback during interactions at service desk. A first draft has been created, and we are looking at launching it in May. Another action item below that is to evaluate opportunities for cross-training between departments. We've completed the initial part, which is an assessment of all staff's cross-training status at this time, and we plan to cross-train all department heads at the end of April. The next goal, goal 2, which is in the first objective, and the first action item, develop a proactive community outreach plan. That is a big task, which we're very excited about. And we want to make sure that it's an intentional work and a holistic work. So we're going to postpone this to FY 2026. The next thing is to bring Story Walk back to Needham. This is also in progress. A book title has been selected, Wonder Walkers. It's by a Massachusetts author, Misha Asher. And so that is going to hopefully be completed in May. The location has been selected to be at the Needham Rail Trail. So that's exciting. The next one is exploring the costs and issues related to purchasing and installing an electronic messaging board. That's in progress. We are exploring the costs and issues of purchasing. In the meantime, the library can also use the town electronic signs to promote special events. Moving on to the next page, which is re-evaluating and improving the onboarding for new library trustees. This is going to be discussed at the next discussion that is in progress. A draft has been completed and submitted to the trustees for review. Goal 3, most of that has been completed. We're moving on to goal 3, objective 3. Monitor the success of new module for online booking system for study rooms and investigate adding the community room. This is in progress. The community room is currently being explored to be available on the library's online booking system. The next action item is reorganizing the genealogy and archive section of the library website to create easier access for patrons. That is also in progress. The library's website for that particular section is currently being reorganized, and we anticipate that to be completed at the end of April. Next, goal 4. Objective 1. Begin the relocation of large print collection. As Rob mentioned earlier, we are working on that, and we anticipate this to be continued and completed in FY26. The next action item that is still in progress is increasing marketing and training efforts for patrons, especially seniors, for our digital collections and resources. That is in progress. Our reference librarian for Jackie has been working on marketing and training efforts for digital collections. She's also offered technology help and visited an assisted living facility to offer tech help. The next in progress action item is goal 5. The first objective there is to evaluate and standardize collection development practices, and the action item is to review subscription database usage in order to determine additional marketing opportunities. Usage is currently being reviewed. The next action item that's still in progress is updating the patron purchase request form to create greater staff. This is also in progress. We are meeting in April to discuss that process. And then the next one is promote the understanding of the library's collection development, which I missed. That is going to be postponed to FY 2026.
Because we're revising that and haven't done it yet. So
Yes.
we don't want to promote something that we'll revise. a few months later.
Makes sense.
And then moving on to goal 6. And the third objective and third action item there, continue to work with the town of Needham's sustainability manager on the location and installation of EV charging stations at the library. That is also going to be postponed to FY 2026. And the very last one there, working with town hall, decision makers and trustees for an affordable and convincing plan to move forward with construction of phase 1, which will be presented at town meeting in spring 2025. This is in progress. Article has been forwarded by the town manager in March. And the Finance Committee recommended approval by town meeting of Article 29 to fund the construction of phase 1. So May will have an update.
Thank you, Diana. Earhart?
Yeah, when you say postpone to fiscal year 2026, does that mean that that's going to be part of the action plan for 2026?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to say that this is very well organized and seems like it will make the review of the action plan or the review of the strategic plan very easy to do, as much more organized than last year. So thank you for putting this together ahead of time.
And thank you not only for putting it together, but for all the effort
Yeah.
that's reflected
Yeah,
by the
exactly.
accomplishments.
It's very impressive.
There's a lot of completed in
Yeah,
progress,
exactly.
which is
Yeah.
great to see.
And even the in progress ones are in progress at this meeting or next meeting. They'll be done by next month.
Any discussion on any of the specific items in that, or should we move on to the next item?
I would even recommend that we don't even discuss, because these specific items are the things that we are going to be discussing after we've reviewed them.
Excellent point. Great. In that case, we will move on to the onboarding document.
So I'll turn this over to Diana.
Sure, yeah. So this is part of our action plan. So we wanted, part of the action item was to create a onboarding for trustees. So what we have here is the first draft, and in the interest of time, we'll just go over the main outline. So the first part is talking about the trustees structure itself, the members, the trustees bylaws, the responsibilities, the meeting schedule, information on previous meetings. And there's a significant, the next item is the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners trustee resources. There's a significant amount of resources on that page, and we've linked it there as well. The next section is specific to the library, the mission statement, the vision statement, our strategic plan, the organizational chart, our department roles and responsibilities. We have a section about the policies and procedures, our annual report, financial information. The next section talks about library networks, regional and national organizations. And then we talk about local government information. And then the next part is need of Free Public Library nonprofit affiliates, and then appendices at the end. So there's a lot of pages here. I just want to cover the main outline of the content.
I would just say this is not only useful for onboarding, but it's useful for all of us. It's extraordinarily valuable reference, well organized. I'm grateful to have it.
I would say the one thing is, because this is something that's going to be theoretically going out every year to newly elected trustees, if people are elected newly every year, I don't think we should have like the names of who the trustees are. You should just have, there's 7 members, a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, etc., as opposed to where it currently says Earhart and Bob on page 2. And I don't know, for the same thing with the staff, if it's something that like all the staff needs to be in it, or just like Rob, like the senior staff, and then like I'm just throwing it out there as a talking point.
I wonder, I mean, there's certainly more updating, but it might be helpful, especially for newer folks, to have the current staff names.
Okay.
Just as kind of a quick reference guide. Like, this is incredibly helpful. As a quick reference guide.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as we're okay updating this every year.
Right.
The trustee names I'm less concerned about because we all know each other. But for the staff names, that could be helpful.
The dream is obviously we don't have to change it every year.
Yes, exactly.
This is going to be the same board of trustees forever.
And staff members too.
Right. But if we were to list the trustees, that's something that at the end of April, we could annually just update based on elections and officers.
Could be.
But
Well,
this isn't a document that would need to be like
no, it wouldn't be,
voted
right,
and approved and go through the process like that. So we could
right.
update.
One thought I have, so when I first came on board, one of the first things I did was attend the MLBC. They had orientation meetings for, it wasn't just for new trustees, but it was some kind of meeting that they held where trustees from all over sort of Eastern Mass showed up and sat in on their talks. And it also helped connect me with what the MLBC does, and I signed up for their email list, and I sent that some way other than, in addition to providing new trustees with links to, it might take some active work when new trustees come on board to say, to help find something for them to do, a way to, something for them to attend or engage, so that they can sort of become a little bit more part of that larger world, which I found very useful. I'm not sure that newer trustees have had that opportunity.
Can I follow up on
Yeah.
that? Because I think, that gives me the thought that there should almost be a, like, after you read this document, next, what should you do? Right? Like, maybe you should sign up for one of these, like,
Kinda
meet and greets
hand
with the
somebody
MDLC.
to
Like, when
find
you should do
something
one of
for
those
them
things.
to
Yeah.
participate in.
Yeah.
That helps kind of loop you into the larger, because most people coming onto library boards they're not librarians in most cases, so they're not linked into that world.
It's an entirely different vernacular and ecosystem. Yes.
I can imagine that kind of recommendation of being like finding these ways to get engaged with that statewide network, and then there's also, watch the last meeting on YouTube, right? Like before we
Yeah,
Go back and read the
Or
last
something
year
active.
minutes or something.
Not just, the list of links is great and useful, but to sort of actually do, when somebody comes on board, look around, see what's going on and find something for them to engage with.
Yeah.
It's almost like when we met tonight with the Friends, as well as just us getting together and being, understanding we're part of something greater.
Yeah, the
And
larger
how to-
ecosystem. like
exactly.
that.
And just being able to find out kind of like where you fit into this whole thing. Because I remember when I first came, it was just like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah, kind of deer in the headlights.
Oh, yeah.
So something to participate in. Okay.
Yeah, so many of those little things aren't obvious, like show up to a friend's event and introduce yourself to the members of the friends that are at the event, right? Like that should be something that, is just recommended that you do in this. But it wouldn't be obvious because, like you just kind of show up at the meeting and now you're looking at budget reports and, I think those little tips are really helpful.
Any further discussion on the onboarding documents? Yes, sir.
You had sent me a copy of this ahead of time, and I sent you some feedback. But one of the things that I think I mentioned that I just wanted to in my feedback to you was that this section on the financial information, there's a lot of pieces of this, like the library trust funds, the state aid, the friends, that are very difficult for new trustees to wrap their heads around. And part of that is not just like, what are these things, but it's also the ways that they get used around the year that aren't obvious unless you go to a year's worth of meetings, right? Like some of us who have been on for several years often ask like the same questions again and again because we forget. We're like, oh yeah, why did we spend so much money from the trust funds in July and August? And it's like, oh right, because we don't actually have our budget from the town in place yet in order to purchase collection materials. Like those types of things would be really helpful to have in here.
And I think
Like one paragraph of each of those. What is the library trust funds and what are they used for?
And this is a draft, and that part we haven't gotten to yet, and that this time, and Rob is going.
I didn't do it yet. But yes.
Yeah, even just the town budget cycle too. going through
When
the time.
they're used, you always ask a lot
Yeah,
about when
right.
they're used. So that's
Yes.
the question.
Thank you for putting that together.
Yeah, yes.
Look forward to seeing that put into use. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we've got a revised schedule for library policies.
So we shared a revised schedule just based on the work that we've done and some changes that have come up since the fall. So what we have here is in orange. So the status column, the first four policies have been approved, and then you'll see we're sort of still following through the chronology of what we had set up with the priority numbers of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One of the revisions to it was, I think I mentioned before, was the expansion of the timeline from a 2 academic year schedule to something longer. So we've extended it to March of 2027 for priorities 4, 5, and 6, so that 1, 2, and 3, our goal is to get those done by the end of this calendar year. Then in January, start focusing on the policies noted with a priority of 4, 5, and 6, and continue that work into March of 2027. So we've updated that. We also have a proposed action column now, where we include an update on whether something's been approved, whether the policy is one that we need to create, or if we're going to be consolidating some policies. You'll see that also listed here. So we just wanted to get an updated timeline in your hands. That would be good, at least for the next few months. Until we get a roadblock or maybe get caught on the film and photography policy for a few months or something and have to revise something. But this is our thinking as of now, and so we've pushed out the timeline just based on the time the work has taken so far for us to revise these policies and not rush them, and the substantive conversations trustees have had in making sure that they have the best policies possible. So we don't want to stick to that timeline and just because. So that's the main change, and then just more clarity about what's been done and what our intentions are now. Moving forward with consolidating policies or creating new ones.
Any thoughts or questions about the revised timeline?
So one comment, one question. I think it's very helpful that these are now in order as to when we want them done. I think on the previous one, it was just kind of all random and we went back and forth and said this one, this one. For the ones that are now approved, should they have the last revised date actually be changed to when they're approved? Because it doesn't look like they are. Like, for example, like the very first one said approved 1/14/2025, and it says last revised date 6/24/2010.
Supposed to be satisfying.
This will be satisfied, exactly. If you just check it off, and you're like, oh, I can take that out of my mind. Or even like a box that says completed or something like that. Yeah, exactly, check.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Just like,
So much.
it's so satisfying to see all the work that we've been doing on
Yeah, we've
this.
actually done some things.
Yeah. But I wanted to raise something that's a little tangential, but is inspired by looking at ahead to you had linked to some of the relevant policies on Wellesley's page. And I followed one of those links and it brought me to a page that was actually a web page and not a PDF for their policy. And it would be really nice if we can transition our policies to web pages as opposed to downloadable documents. it dramatically increases the accessibility of those policies. Like accessibility is both in terms of being able to read it quickly, but also in terms of being able to use screen readers and things like that to read those policies, because PDFs are usually not very accessible. Also, it's just nitpicky that a lot of our downloadables are .docs, and we say that they're PDFs in parentheses after the titles of those policies. So I would love it if we factor that into some of our work over the next years to transition those to web pages.
Now, with it being just the web page, are we able to do corrections so that it makes it's easier? I was just asking as not a serious tech person, but as a lay person, would that have, if they said, yes,
It's a
you'd be
correction
able-
to a web page,
Yes.
it's text, easy.
That's good, because then that just follows along more with what you're saying. It's like we can maintain currents.
Yeah, we just copy the contents from the document into whatever our content management system is.
And things can be corrected on web pages pretty like Gail was saying, pretty easily. Something needs to be corrected or updated on a web page.
But that's a good
We
thing.
can't just log in and do it, but to whoever's authorized.
Right.
Right. That's what I was
Yeah.
getting at, is that if we have something and it goes back with what Josh was saying, it was completed this day, this, that, so we can maintain this current. Good.
So, Rob, do we want to continue the monthly policy meeting that we've been doing up to this point? Is that something?
Yeah, I think we've skipped
We
a
skipped
month
this
or
one 'cause
so, so,
partly because I was crazy with this election.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, so let's meet before the end of April.
Okay.
Because I need to get my head back around policies.
yeah, that's fine. And debate.
Would I be attending with that?
So you and I will be doing the 3 and 4 together, right? Three,
The
strategic
action
plan,
plan.
the action plan, the review, right?
Yeah, this priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is
Different.
separate than the goals.
So I think this would be a good segue into the next item under new business, unless we have anything more on the schedule. Just to, might be a little bit late today, but hopefully not too much. So there's discussion around the draft photography and filming policy. Who knows, Rob, for that?
So I shared that as a Word document. Well,
Oh, yeah.
with Josh before, Josh had an interest in this policy, so Josh shared comments which are not reflected here because I think they're good substantive comments that trustees will want to hear and talk about. But this target filming policy is simply, well, not simply, but more of an operational policy and what's allowed in the building. And it's not intended to address like First Amendment audits, you know, that sort of thing. This is about affecting the operation of the library by wanting to, you know, film or record in the library, whether it's for commercial purposes or student project or something, just setting forward.
But what if someone did come in? with
So
cameras
that's
for a person?
Right, so that was one of my questions for Rob. So I had 3 major comments. Like, first of all, I thought like all the new policies that we've been doing, these nice concise policies, I thought those were very nice, concise, gave a lot of information policies. But I did ask Rob that question about like, what about, like, has this been run by the town legal yet about like First Amendment stuff? This is because this is as Rob was saying, more procedural than an actual like a more legal policy. I think that that's something that probably needs to be addressed separately from this specific policy. The other 2 comments that I had were, this refers to 2 major ones that I had, is this was referring to non-commercial photography, but I think we probably should at some point build a commercial photography one as well, because I can imagine that there are people who would want to do graduation photos or wedding photos, or if a film crew like a commercial film crew want to come by and use the library for something, this does not address that. This addresses only non-commercial, non-public things. and the last thing that I was a little concerned about, not concerned, but brought up was that in the second last paragraph, it talks about how Needham Free Public Library does its own recording and people have to give consent to that. But consent is, you need to be an adult, and with our new safe child policy or children in the library policy, they might not have adults with them. So those are my comments, and Rob and I talked about this briefly. So I think those are things that are going to, since this is a draft, they're going to need to be adjusted.
Probably a good idea that we
Say that again.
maybe not do photography or video with children present unless there is express consent.
But I mean, like, they're probably, like, when there are programs in here, sometimes there's like a photographer or
Parents have been recording all of their programs the last few years. All of them on cable, they have cameras, 3 cameras throughout the room. They're right at straight ahead at the performer or the event person. However, they can get audience pictures, and audiences can be a variety of different ages.
right. So that's something that I think if we're like, either there needs, I don't know what the signage is for those.
There is signage up in the room now about children's filming.
Yes. There's one over there. Too.
Yes.
So.
That is recent. I do have a question on whether or not the trustees have decided to allow filming in the Wyeth room. That has always been off limits the last few decades. Are they going to allow filming in that room? With the pictures.
So there's a Wyeth room separate policy
Okay.
that
controls
does
that.
say that, which is on this timeline.
Okay,
Uh,
so that's a
but
separate policy.
We wanted to keep the Wyeth room out of here.
Okay.
It's special and it has its own policy.
Is it important to reference that policy in here?
I know, because we talked about that, because it's one of these things, we don't want as many people as possible to know we have
14.
all this expensive artwork on the walls. So we could, but
So,
you know.
for
So
this-
it depends, like, we haven't revised the Wyeth room policy yet, so when we get there, maybe we might come back and do revision here, whatnot, but we haven't fully talked through that. I assume at least one trustee would want to talk about that revision to that policy.
Or do we
Looking
have-
at her.
I forget off the top of my head if there's a, you know, do we have discretion, like, oh yeah, policy may be subject to the exception of discretion of the director, so that always fall under there. It's like, under your purview to say not allowed here.
Yeah.
At this time. I have, one other comment is whether we want to make this language a little more forceful and say that it shall not obstruct library operations, it shall not in any way disturb members of the public instead of should.
Should it's conditional.
Yeah.
And to Josh's point, maybe it would be good to say that, you know, perhaps the fourth very last sentence, you know, generally commercial photography is not allowed, and then the notwithstanding. Just so we have it in the policy that the default for commercials, that it's not allowed
Right.
unless the director specifies otherwise. Would that make sense?
I think so. I mean, I wasn't sure exactly how to word it, but like, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a request for someone to do their school, like their graduation photos here, their
Not
wedding
those type of
photos.
things, but we have had Channel 5 come in here and use our community room for interviews in the past. We have had some film crews in here, all of the discretion of the director.
Right, so maybe that should then just be commercial, any commercial recording, filming or photography is at the.
Will we include the media in that, TV, let's say Channel 5, which is right down the street, came and wanted to do something about the library. How does that
There's no
fall?
commercial.
It always goes through the director. They're going to bring in a film crew, they talk
But but are we allowing it or?
Yeah, well, as long as you put it at the discretion of the director. It's allowed.
But there's no default that it is allowed.
Correct. I don't think there should be a default.
Couple of small language comments. The third bullet probably should be verbal or written consent as compared to consent verbal or written. That's sort of Elizabethan.
And that's also where like the child library or state child policy, whatever it's called, fits in there because, again, there might be a 12-year-old here who can't consent to be filmed or photographed. And these signs don't apply to them because they're not in here for a program, they're upstairs or whatever. Like, I'm just not sure.
That's a style comment.
But I understand your style comment, but it's in the same location, basically, as to how do we fit those two policies together? As, like the one that I got stuck on.
What this says, it's only allowed with the express consent verbal or written. And if
So if there's a
there's
child,
no, so
then
it can't
it's
happen.
just go, okay.
I would think, yeah,
Yeah.
it can't happen if you can't get that.
And I think that's sort of fine.
Is that
So
what
if
we
it-
do in practice?
In the past, in probably current practice, they will let people know that they're gonna be doing photography. And if someone says no, that area doesn't get photographed. They don't get photographed at all.
That's different from actively requiring consent of every parent.
Or
Sounds
independent.
like what we were saying, that without the express consent, then we need, in order to follow that, we would need to ask each.
But also,
Parent or
like you were
guardian,
saying,
yeah.
like, what if there's a 15-year-old who says, sure, you can talk, you can take photos when I'm sitting here, but they can't consent for that.
No.
Like, that's different than them saying no.
Let's just say we take pictures of a lot of BACA heads.
We did photography for the website. We brought in a professional photographer, we went around the library, and I had consent forms, and then every person who was in our photos, I got to sign, I had them sign consent forms, and they're on our website now. They all have signed consent.
So if there's a program in advance where there could be minors, would it be, if that is the
I had
case,
parents sign.
then the parents can sign that and then we are kind of clear?
Well, that's the question. If we have language that says by attending, you are consenting
Right.
to you and your
Right.
children, that is separate from requiring, unless I'm missing something, that's separate from requiring express written consent. So if our practice is more the, you know, we're consenting by coming and we have disclaimer language at the registration part, then I would change the policy from saying express consent is required for any photography.
Yes.
I understand.
Okay.
I understood what you said.
Okay,
Yes.
right. I didn't know if that was-
There's deems and express. And express
Right.
is when you specifically ask
When
the
you go around
person.
with the form and you have them sign
Right.
and you keep the forms, whereas if you are consenting by attending, it's
Mhm.
different.
It's different, yes. Right. That makes absolutely.
So I would just revise that language to.
But I don't know that I'm like, that's true for like programs and stuff like that. I'm just more worried about like the rest of the library and there's people here and not here for programs.
That gets to right of privacy and I'm not, I don't, being in a public place, you are subjecting yourself to something. I don't remember my
It is
law
a
here,
public,
for
there's
players
that.
here. You're sort of, you know, assuming that residents.
Mhm,
But
yeah.
you don't have a right to privacy in public places, which is separate. Paragraph, but
Right.
I'd have to do more
Yeah.
research to really make sure.
No, I mean, that sounds right, but that's what it's about, the whole First Amendment stuff.
Yeah.
Like, if you're walking down the
So-
street, you won't know for it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I think just to, because we got a bunch more things on the agenda, would it make sense at this point, Rob, do you have the pen on these changes?
I do.
Okay.
I have a
Can
couple,
I add one more?
yeah, I had a couple more to add
Absolutely,
too.
yes. Yep, Gerhard.
Waiting.
I
Jay,
just have
you
one
were
more
ahead of me.
Comment.
Yep.
This sentence, into the, those wanting to photograph archival materials would be referred to the archivist for preservation purposes. Does that mean those wanting to photograph archival materials for preservation purposes will be referred to the archivist? So I don't understand.
Yeah, we can
Are
clarify that.
people,
I think the intent was sort of like, we're making you talk to them because we don't want you to ruin our historical.
Just get rid of, just get rid of the words for
But
preservation
it's awkward,
purposes.
yeah, we'll fix it.
Yeah, so I have a few small things. One is I don't think we need the first sentence of the policy. Yes, we create a warrant. This doesn't really help us with the policy, so I think we could scrap that for efficiency. Same with I don't think we need the notwithstanding the above in the last sentence of the whole policy. We could probably just say this policy may be subject to exception. I had to look up what notwithstanding means before I made that suggestion. Another piece is in that second to last paragraph. We say library frequently photographs, films, or records programs and events for its own publicity and promotional purposes. Publicity and promotional is basically the same thing. So I was wondering if we needed both of those phrases for publicity and promotional purposes, or are we talking about promoting the library and publicizing the event, which presumably was in the past, and so I didn't quite understand those two use cases and how they were different.
We don't need that.
Okay, because we could have distributional
Events for
purposes.
promotional purposes.
Okay. And then the title, we constantly refer all throughout as photography, filming, and recording, but the policy says photography and filming. So I'm wondering if we want to add recording in there, and if this is also then covering audio recording, not just visual recording.
Yeah.
And how explicit we want to be about the fact that it also is covering audio recording. If someone was to try and capture the soundscape of the library, right? Or whatever, if that is also what this policy is referring to. That's a question.
I think that's a good point.
And lastly, is this covering personal use of cell phone, where you pick up your phone and
Sure.
shoot
Mhm.
around you?
That's a recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
we need to kind of be aware that people do that all the time.
Well, there,
I think that's to be, I mean, at this point, I think that's to be expected,
well, the kids go up there and they do those challenges. They do it in the library. You see them dancing and recording each other doing that. I've seen it
Yeah,
1,000 times. So
Right. we need
That's
to
like-
Keep that in mind.
that's like a social,
And the kids do it, I think adults.
that I
Something
haven't
They
seen.
think is interesting.
But I don't think that
Take your
comes
phone.
under here.
What's
They're not library staff,
No. Right.
so I don't think we need to address it here.
But can I just clarify, this is not just for library staff, this policy?
Okay, yeah, this is for people.
Like the first half is about for the public and the
Yeah.
chunky paragraphs about what we do.
So one patron cannot photograph, film another patron unless compliant with this
I
policy.
think that's. I think we
well,
are
that's getting into the
addressing
whole First
Your average
Amendment,
person with a cell phone.
Yeah.
right, privacy
Our
out in the world.
bulleted information here is just sort of about the operational impact. If you want to, you can't interfere with the operations of the library or disturb members of the public with your equipment. And then for minors, you just need consent. That's what we're telling non-library people who come in here. Otherwise,
It seems pretty
we
limited.
can't
pretty-
say you can't record all of the books in our mystery collection. You can do whatever you want. We can't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically what we're saying here, I think it's important that people understand this is for not just commercial photographers or library staff or whatever, but for your patron who's got a cell phone in their hand, that we're going to tell them they're not allowed to take pictures of children, basically. They can shoot everything else, or can they take pictures of other adults in here? I mean, I think it needs to
I
be a little
think
bit
maybe
clearer
we
about
say
it.
it that photography or filming is only allowed with express, right? 'Cause the only thing we can do is say you're not allowed to be in the library, right? If you're violating this, you're photographing somebody without their consent, right? Right.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if we need to change it here. It's just something
Yeah,
I
I just wonder if it's
It's my
clear
sense of
enough who we're talking to.
Yeah.
If we're concerned about First Amendment, I mean, this is a kind of lawyer's cop out, but at the very end, I think it's applicable. You could just say this policy is subject to applicable law.
Okay.
Yeah, are you going to be addressing in any other policy or this one, the fact that sometimes the entertainers that come in want to record their performance? Used for their own promotional, is that included in this
Is that
policy?
commercial?
Well, that's
Or is that
commercial.
someplace it is commercial?
Or is it-
So I mean, we're just gonna have a
That's
line
like
in there about
Evan
commercial.
King, Played his music for the kids. The guitar guy, he comes in.
And he
Mr.
could
Evans.
have somebody with a camera recording his performance.
Right,
and
right.
post that on his
I think
website.
that's fine under this policy. They couldn't record our kids though, right?
Right.
Normally, they would not be showing faces.
Right, so as long as there's like, we add that line about commercial.
Okay.
Any further discussion on policy, the draft policy? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item and take your revised draft of that policy up at the next meeting. Moving to old business, we've got a review of the revised Children in the Library and Safe Child Policy, which was circulated. Any discussion on that?
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we didn't vote, or the trustees didn't take up approving this policy at the last meeting because we didn't have the internal procedures ready to share with the trustees. So they are included as a separate document. They are not the wordage at the bottom of the revised policy. And this is a policy that Megan and I had met and talked about early on. And I think at least for 2 or 3 meetings, the trustees have talked and we've made great edits. And so the policy, I believe, is in its final draft form. So we want to share with you the safe child procedures that staff developed and that we've shared with staff outside of the children's department because these internal procedures apply to the entire building. So we wanted to share that because so much came out of the original policy that was really procedures that Kay expressed an interest in seeing the internal procedures just to be assured that language and direction for our staff didn't go away completely.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of this was in the old policy and it's taken out. So I just wanted the trustees to have access to it before we voted on what the procedures are. We're not voting on the procedures, but to know what they are. Thank you, Bob.
This was a lot of detail. It seems very thoughtfully crafted.
Yeah, luckily our staff have decades of experience and thinking, working through all sorts of scenarios. So this is also a document that is not static. We will add to it or revise it as new things, our staff experience new things, or adjustments need to be made.
What's a record in Sierra for?
It's our system that we have, the patient records and the catalog and things like that. So,
But how would I be in there? Like,
I think you have a library card.
yes, I do have that, right. Okay. Would you have?
yeah, it has all your, it has your information, your patron, when you create a library card, your information is in there. So your name, your address, your phone number, your email.
Credit score.
That part, no, we don't, Rick.
No.
We don't
Yeah.
record anything you object out. That we don't do.
The very last thing is an adult in the children's room. It does not appear to be using the children's collection. I'm assuming that allows still for like adults to be browsing the children's books to take home for their children.
Yes,
Yes.
that is all.
Okay, because
Yeah, that's what
that
we
means.
allow.
Right, okay. So I'm sure there's times I was in there getting books for my kids.
Yep, and that's welcome.
Any Eric?
I wanted to just make a comment about when we're doing these policies. I love that we have these reasons for revision, for all of the policies that we're updating. Is it possible we could have some set of like goals for newly created policies. Like we were just reviewing the photography one, like having a similar section, just giving us a sense of like, how should we understand what we're trying to do with this language? Like what were the intentions to create this policy, the goals that we have for the language, what it achieves. That would just be nice as we look into the future as we create more policies.
Any further discussion on safe child policy? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the policy?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved unanimously.
Check the box on the floor.
It's so satisfying.
So satisfying.
Make more lists and check off more boxes.
So
That's my
satisfying.
advice to anybody. So moving out of old business, we've got the library art and exhibit committee report, and I'll turn it over to Kay for that.
Yes, so we have a meeting scheduled for next week, which I was holding off on until I found out, A, whether I was gonna be here at all, and B, whether I can still be chair of the arts committee, which check both those boxes, so meeting next week. Currently, yay, I believe,
Wednesday,
yes, next
probably
Wednesday.
upstairs.
Right, so at which point we'll take a look at the remainder of this year up to when the renovations start.
I do have some
September.
applications we can look at.
And at the moment, we have open studios. And then next month is Needham High School art scholars, right? Is that
I've
correct?
already seen the photos that they've sent me. It's gonna be some fantastic stuff and it's gonna fill our wall. This year they had a bumper crop of gold and silver key.
What?
Gold and silver key winners from the Scholastic Art Contest, sponsored by the Boston Globe. So they've got a lot of things coming in and still more.
All right. And our cases, that's one thing we have to work on a bit, is sort of getting stuff to do. Nothing to vote on tonight.
Right, thanks, Kay. For the MacGyver series, I don't have much of a substantive update. I did try to reach out to the street project folks. I just have not heard back from them. Rotating into chair, I'll be happy to have some assistance with MacGyver going forward. But I do have a couple of leads I'll continue following up on, so perhaps we can get those at least teed up for the early fall potentially. We're probably closing in on the last remaining date for this year, so it's probably a little bit too close for that. Otherwise, no update on MacGyver. Friends of the Library, Jay.
I'll mention, besides the financial contribution that Rob mentioned, for which we're grateful, they have a couple of upcoming events. April 27th, in terms of programs, Suzanne Simpson, who's the executive producer of Masterpiece at GBH, is going to have a presentation. Talk about behind the scenes what goes on with Masterpiece. It's great. And then on June 8th, Warren Zanes, who started off as a rock and roller in a Boston band called Del Fuegos, but has since become a really wonderful writer. And his most recent book about the making of Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska album is being filmed right now with Jeremy Allen White from The Bear playing Springsteen and Jeremy Strong playing Springsteen's manager, John Landau. But in any event, he's going to be talking on June 8th, and that's great. So those are the main things to mention as far as the Friends, and I'll just segue into the foundation, which is next on the list. And I know Rob has spoken past meetings about them also making agreeing to provide some funding. They have an event tomorrow night about Rachel Revere, and I think in this room tomorrow night.
This room tomorrow night, they are currently full. There's still wait list. I may have some movement if you want to sign up. This is always people who cancel at the last minute, but they do have Judith Colora, who's presented here in the past. We'll be doing the dramatic presentation, And they're doing a little social hour before that event starts at 6:30.
So is it a dramatic presentation of Rachel Revere?
Rachel Revere, yeah, she will be taking the role of Rachel Revere and will stay in character throughout the entire presentation, including
It's
the
about-
question and answers afterwards. It's what she's known for.
Just remember, June 8th is my birthday.
Oh, no, all right. Put that.
That's great.
All right, thank you, Jay, for that update. Do we have any trustee comments?
I have just a few comments, if it's okay. First, I'd like to congratulate Rob and Kay on their reelection as trustees, as someone who's worked closely with them over the last years. I can attest that they deserve reelection for their efforts and contribution to the trustees. And while I'm thanking people, we should thank the folks, Vipul Bhushan and Megan Mistray for running, and maybe they'll perhaps get involved to support the library with the Friends of the Foundation, find some other way. And then finally, I'd like to thank Earhart for a great year.
Yes.
Serving as chair. Everything you've done to keep things moving and to help Rob in his first year. It's been just a great year for the library. And we look at Rob and Diana here, and we're all just feeling very thankful for the position that the library is in and everything you've done. So thank you, Earhart, for that.
Thank you.
Hands.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hearing no further trustee comments, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Let Earhart do it since it was his last meeting.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.